I want to tell you why I think that Kohberger will confess, and I have a lot of good reasons to think that, and I want you to stay with me and see all those reasons. So, one of the reasons is because I think all of this started when he was very young and he had this horrible visual snow experience. I think the visual snow was much more than just visual snow. I think the visual snow was a problem with his eyes, not being able to see properly. He had kind of, snow in his vision. But I think it's a symptom of what he was really suffering from, which I think was schizophrenia. Now, I am not a psychologist, but just reading some of his posts, there's a lot of clues there that say that this might be schizophrenia, and visual snow is sometimes associated with schizophrenia, right? I've also got some other reasons for this. So if you read his posts, he says he has this horrible depersonalization for almost 2 years. Now that depersonalization feeling for 2 years, that's pretty severe. That's not just, depression. That's depersonalization. If you read on, you'll see why I say that. Um, he sees that life is like a role-playing game. Um, Such as Oblivion. It's like he can see what's going on, but he's not really in it. He's not really living his life. And he feels like, can he get back to being his old self if he pauses the game? But how does he do that in real life? So that kind of depersonalization is pretty severe. And he feels like an organic sack of meat and no self-worth, and he's starting to view everyone as this. Now that is extreme, right? That's if you start feeling like that, you need help, right? You need psychological help, and especially if you're starting to view everyone as this, right? That if anyone around him knew that he was feeling like that, I wish they'd have just got him help at that point because they could have saved these four lives. But to me, this is a sign that he's mentally ill. I wouldn't know for a fact it was schizophrenia because I'm not a psychologist, but there's definitely something serious going on here. So everything he's ever done makes no sense. So he can't find any purpose in his life. He can't find any meaning in his life, that kind of thing. Um, he asks silly questions like, why do humans wear shirts like this and things like that? And what he feels like that we're just animals, and he doesn't really understand what being a human is. He can't connect with humans. um feels like life is pointless and full of nothing, out of reality. um so things like family, he doesn't feel connection with his family. Like when families have a group hug and celebrate, he's stuck in a void of nothing, feeling completely no emotion, feeling nothing. He feels dirty, like there's dirt inside of his head. And this dirt inside of his head phrase is something you hear from a lot of schizophrenics, just so you know. The idea of being dizzy and confused is another schizophrenic trait. So, I'm just saying this because I've known a lot of schizophrenics, but I'm not a psychologist, but this is just my theory. I feel no self-worth. I am intelligent, but I feel the opposite. I say things I don't mean. And this again is another common, schizophrenic, especially with the depersonalization thing. These kind of symptoms are very, very common in schizophrenia. Um, so this house that he lives in basically doesn't seem like it means much to him. He looks at his family, he looks in their faces, and he sees nothing. He can't connect. It's like he's looking at a video game, but less. I mean, this is really intense. He's really in pain here, like pain, except he can't feel the pain. I feel less than mentally damaged. It is like I have severe brain damage. Well, he does, I think. I think that's why he feels like that, because he has got a very severe mental complaint, and I think he needed a lot of help. Um, he constantly battles his demons, and he asks, "Am I here or am I fake?" He doesn't even feel like he really is living, exists, is kind of existing. He feels himself slipping away. He hears screams faintly, but he constantly battles with it. Um, there's so much here. I often fear being 80 years old, alone, and having faint memories of my parents, everything I missed out on. And I think this is part of what comes later. I think in the end, he doesn't want to live anymore. I think because he feels so out of touch and not really alive. I feel like he doesn't want to live anymore. I feel like he gets to the point where he's kind of suicidal and he doesn't want to get old. Um, I think he feels guilty because he says he thinks about his father and what a good man he is and how he treats him like dirt, how I treat him like dirt, he says, because I have this condition and I can't take it. So he feels bad about how he is, but it's not something he can stop. And I think he needed medication at this point, right? And presumably he didn't get it. Or maybe he did get some and it didn't work. I don't know. Um, all these thoughts of remorse, I got this when I was in my stage of discovery. So that's when he found out he had visual snow, I guess. Um, he sees this sickly, tired, useless, and stupid man in the mirror. He's a complete disgrace. He doesn't even deserve to live. You see that? He doesn't even deserve to live. He's talking about himself. He's saying, I want to commit suicide, really, or I don't want to be alive, or something like that. And I think later on it became stronger. And I think this is part of why I think he wants to confess now. So I remember when I was 15, I'd wander around at 2 a.m. Everything was so generic, nowhere felt like home. I saw things that were not there, a different reality. Now that is very schizophrenic, right? A different reality, things that were not there. I felt eerie and alone. I died during those nights. That's another thing that a lot of schizophrenics say, right? They feel like they died. It's kind of a weird feeling. It's a feeling as if they've already died. I feel like a criminal, but where was my record? So he hadn't actually done anything bad, but he just felt like a really bad person. I can't talk without flinching now. I used to be this healthy blonde-haired boy with blue eyes, and in a few years I have darker hair, darker eyes, half the body weight. Where did I leave off? Now, a lot of his friends have talked about this, that he changed a lot at one point in his life from this kind of guy that seemed quite a healthy, happy guy to a guy that just seemed he lost a lot of weight and he just seemed like a completely different person. So where did I leave off? I try to sleep, I try to clear my head, but the pressure won't go away. So pressure in his head, another schizophrenic trait, symptom. The pain and depression won't leave. Again, a schizophrenic trait, the pain and the depression. I'm so convinced here that he's in schizophrenia land here. Being me is this horrible disease that I was given. Imagine that. He feels like he's got this horrible disease and he can't get rid of it. It's him. I think of this as I succumb to sleep, but I see a large intensity of black, yellow, white fuzz. It makes my mind fizzle and I can barely keep in the bounds of reality. It's as if the ringing in my ears and the fuzz in my vision is simply all of the demons in my head mocking me. Again, demons in my head mocking me. That's a very similar to a lot of schizophrenic people that I know have said that about themselves. I fall asleep, but I wake up quickly to bloody screams. Is any of this here? Am I brain damaged? No. Then why am I like this? I have these thoughts in my head. I search for someone to relate to me. Everyone looks down upon me. No one can relate. As I try to read, suddenly my eyes look right through the words. When I look up, I see blue dots near the center of my vision. When I feel slightly calm, it gets hard to breathe, and I see bright dots in my vision. Nothing I do is enjoyable, and there's more and more and more of this. But this is what he's saying on July the 4th, right? So this is a day that he should be enjoying his time with his family and celebrating life and all that. And this is how he's feeling. You know, to me, this is a sign that he was already way on his way to what happened at this point. And this, we think this was in 2011, so it was a long time ago. What was it, 10 years before the 11 years before the murders? And, somebody could have helped him at this this stage. I feel really sad that somebody didn't spot this and help him and do something about this. Also know that he had drug problems and he was in rehab and stuff like that. Maybe that was trying to cope with the visual snow and the schizophrenia in the only way he knew how to, because he didn't have medical drugs. I don't know. Anyway, his family as well also know that he's got that tendency that he might try and kill himself. All right. So his aunt said this in Radar Online in an interview. She said that he was a shy and troubled teenager. And she's the aunt that he was in Las Vegas with, I believe, for Thanksgiving just after the murders. Okay, so just bear that in mind, that the family thought he might try and kill himself and that he's a shy and troubled teenager. So there's a lot of signs here that the guy is desperate. I want you to see that, imagine in your head that this guy is already suicidal and he's kind of making a plan of what he's going to do as kind of his big thing in his life before he dies. This is how I think he's feeling. Okay, so if you look here, he opens a cell phone account with AT&T in June. Officers are at the house 11:22 for noise complaints on August the 16th, which I think is Kohberger calling the cops on 11:22. August the 21st, Kohberger's phone is using resources in that area between 10:34 and 11:35. And then he's not arrested, he's stopped by the police at 11:37 by the Latah County Sheriff's deputy. So he's stopped then. So I think already they know that he is what I would call stalking. I know it's not a legal term of stalking, but he's harassing Kaylee, I think, at this point. And so they're stopping him because they know he's been around the residence for an hour or something. That's what I'm guessing. I don't know if they know at the time that he also called in this noise complaint. I don't know about that. Anyway, so then he starts his course at WSU. Then September the 1st, there's a noise complaint and another noise complaint, right? So I think he's getting ready for what he's about to do. And I think also this shows that he knows he's going to get caught one day. When he actually does the crime, he's going to get caught because there's like a history of all this going on. I don't think he has any way of avoiding being captured for this crime because there's a history of his activity. So on November the 22nd, which is like a week after the murders, the cops admitted that Kaylee had been followed around a supermarket around a month before the killings, but said they're unable to verify claims that she had a stalker. Now that's because the legal definition in Idaho of stalking is very different to what you or I might call stalking, okay? If there's a guy that's driving around your house for an hour on August the 21st and just keeps trying to look in the windows or whatever, to me that's stalking, right? And if he keeps calling in noise complaints to just see what, just to annoy your household or whatever, to see what's going on, that to me is a kind of stalking. It may not be illegal stalking, maybe you call it harassment, I don't know what you'd call it, but I think there's this history, and I think the cops knew that Kohberger was doing this. And I think they gave him a hard time. Like every time they saw him anywhere near there, they tried to arrest him and they tried to. And the reason I think that is because there's first of all, on the 21st of August, there is actually a citation where I think they get him just for a seat belt, which most of the time the police are not going to give you a citation for a seatbelt these days. They just tell you off, right? They just say, don't do it again. But they did. They gave him a citation. But also he'd had another citation earlier than that, because this was on the 22nd of August. But this is an FTA. So this is a failure to appear. So this means he's had a citation before this and he hasn't appeared for that citation in court. And that would normally be 3 or 4 weeks after the actual citation. So there appears to have been something going on in July, I think, around July time, that he got this citation for, that he's now an FTA for, right? So I think there's a whole history going on here, and I think this shows that Kohberger knew he was going to get caught at some point. I think there was history going on here. Now this part takes a bit of explaining. So, a lot of you guys, when I first came on here and I told you that I was talking to a pseudonym of Brian Kohberger and he was confessing to the crime and all that kind of thing, you all laughed at me, thought I was crazy. But now I think it's pretty well established that Kohberger used a lot of pseudonyms online, and I believe this is one of them, Trey Patterson. So Trey Patterson, first of all, you might see that he's got this picture of a cat in his profile, and the original picture is horrible. You can see that the cat is really being strangled. So, that is a really horrible picture. I'm not going to show it in big detail here, but just so you know. So this account, I think, is Brian Kohberger pretending to be Trey Patterson. That's my theory. So he confessed online a number of times just after the murders. These were all, I think, less than a week after the murders. This one especially, saying they were very beautiful, sexy enough to muddle your thoughts for a minute. Their power of lust is what formed their weakness, and they thought that a sweet, nervous man was just an easy laugh or a dismissal once their transaction was done. I still wonder, did they let out even a tiny laugh as they were bladed? It's hard to scream through duct tape. So to me, this is a confession. Obviously, he's talking to me. He seems to be talking about Kaylee and Maddie. Um, he's as I presume they said something bad to him at one time or something like that. I don't know what their transaction was. Some people have suggested it might be an on OnlyFans transaction. So on OnlyFans, people can view other people in different ways and pay for that online. So it might have been something like that. I don't know if Kaylee and Maddie were doing such something like that. I don't know. But anyway, the last bit, of course, did they let out even a tiny laugh as they were bladed? Feels like he's basically saying, bet you're sorry now that you laughed at me, kind of thing, that kind of thing. And then it's hard to scream through duct tape. This makes me wonder whether, this is a clue that this really is him. If at the crime scene, they really were wrapped up in duct tape in some way around their mouth or what have you, then this would be a sign that this really was the killer, right? Anyway, so the next one is, all right, maggots, my turn. The next level doesn't get to be decided by you. It will be decided by me. You're about to get a real lesson in the use of power. I'm going to show you the definition of a real bad mm-mm-mm. Keep your sorry ears to the ground, and maybe your shock won't last as long as mine did. You are only spectators. I am the show. Now, to me, this feels like the narcissistic, I'm the best person in the room, I'm the smartest person in the room kind of attitude that Brian Kohberger kind of had, right? And this all right maggots, it feels like he's really looking down at everybody else. So to me, this feels like it really is Brian Kohberger. And there's some other stuff here where he's basically saying, I'm sorry for being such a bad person, and thank you for tolerating me, and um, I'm thankful for your gracious tolerance, which I know comes not with fluid ease. So obviously, he thinks people around him, aren't comfortable with him the way he is. I swim too far out, and in my selfish need for deliverance, very often lose sight of the larger efforts of harbouring and caretaking and concern by those around me. Now, to me, that sounds like he's saying, my family have to put up with a lot from me, and I'm making it really difficult for them. Now, I don't know if the family knew that I'm pretty sure they didn't know that he had done this at this point, but I feel like that's what he's writing this for. I think he's writing that to his family, and maybe, I don't know if he's got friends as well, but it sounds like he hasn't got any friends. Sometimes I push beyond reasonable limits. It is goodwill that is undeserved and thought-provoking. So I think this sounds like someone who feels like a sack of meat, an organic sack of meat, who probably wants to die, who feels like he wants to prove that he's superior to everyone else in one action by killing these four people, basically, but realizes the effects this is having on other people in his life. That's just me. That's what I think. So this is
There
an
we go.
article in the New York Post where it was said that Brian Kohberger, not only does he have autism and has sort of mannerisms that make it difficult for him to come across well in a courtroom, and he rocks and things like that when he's doing cognitive tasks, um, completely involuntary mannerisms from his ASD, especially while engaged in a cognitive task of listening to someone else, that kind of thing. But it also says that he's unable to help in his own defense. So she says that her client's communication skills are so inadequate that he is struggling to assist in his own defense, and that his lack of social awareness will likely create an unwanted impression or lack of remorse. Now, I think the truth behind what she's saying there is that Kohberger doesn't want to help in his own defense. And I think that's because he originally, when he did all this, he knew that he was a little bit crazy and he knew that he was going to get caught, and he knew that he was going to be found guilty. And I think he knows that he's going to be found guilty. I think he knows that now beyond a doubt. And I think what he's going to do is when he gets into the courtroom, he's going to insist on taking the stand, and I think he will actually confess and tell the whole story. And I think he wants to tell the whole story. I think he wants that kind of attention. I think a lot of why he did this was to prove that he's the smartest guy in the room, kind of thing, to prove that he could stump the police by doing things in such a weird way, and in such a very pre-planned way, uh, in such a manner that there were so many facts that would lead to reasonable doubt and so on. I think he thinks he's been really clever, and I think he wants to kind of confess to that after the whole case has been put in front of the jury. I think he knows that he's going to get found guilty, but I think he wants the whole case to come out in court so that everyone knows what he did. And then at the end, I think he wants to tell the whole story himself and go down, with notoriety for what he did and that kind of thing. I think that's the whole reason he did this whole thing, or main reason that he did this whole thing, not the whole reason. But I think he wants to be one of those people in the textbooks that he's read so much in criminology. I think he wants to be one of those criminals, and probably what he thinks of as the best of those criminals. Um, and I think that's why he studied criminology. I think that's why he did that whole questionnaire asking so many criminals how they got away with it, or what they would have done differently and why they didn't get away with it, what went wrong, that kind of thing. I think he wanted to learn all the mistakes that they might have made and try not to make those, and then learn from the best of them, how they got away with it, kind of thing. And I think that was the whole point of the whole thing, just to prove that he is the smartest guy in the room. I think it's all about his narcissism. Um, I just think that he is a very unusual person. I think this is his whole purpose in life, to have done this thing. This is his ultimate thing in life to have done. And I think it's worth dying for to him. I think he knows he's going to get the death penalty. I think he pretty much knows that. And I think he feels it's worth dying for. I think he already was very, very depressed in his life, as we know from the visual snow posts and so on. He felt like he was a sack of meat, an organic sack of meat. Um, and he had no real feelings, not even for his family. And he kind of sounds like he feels like he should feel bad that he does things and says things to his dad that upset his dad, but he doesn't really seem to feel those feelings. Um, and he just, I think he just felt so depressed. That the visual snow took away a lot of his enjoyment in life as well, and then he couldn't get a woman, and um, you know there was none of that going on in his life. I think all of this together, he was very depressed in his life, so he just basically gave himself one target in life, to commit these murders. And I think that's why he did the running and the boxing and so many other things that he did, like the criminology degree and the psychology part of the degree, and all of that stuff was all leading up to this one crime. Now, I don't think when he started he knew it was going to be Kaylee and Maddie and Xana and Ethan. I think he probably thought he would be a serial killer, and I think after these four, I think originally he planned this to be a one, maybe Maddie or Kaylee, but after this incident, he was going to have other murders as well, or he might have already committed some murders before these four. I don't know, but I think that was his whole motivation, just to be the smartest guy in the room in the criminology world, to be talked about, to be in books. And he's got that, right? Already there's people writing lots of books about him. I think James Patterson brings out a book, is it this week or next week? Very soon. Um, a lot of people are really like entranced with this particular case. Everyone on social media is talking about it. Everyone on in the crime world is talking about it. Podcasts and have you what have you as well. So I think that is the motivation. I think that is what he's going to do. I think he's going to, at the end of the trial, he's going to confess. And that's just my opinion. But that is what I think is going to happen.